Welcome to the Power of Love show, sponsored by the D.D. Jackson Foundation, where we shine a light on loss and grief and how it impacts our lives. We are here to provide hope, resources, and a community so no one feels alone in their grief. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Power of Love, sponsored by the D.D. Jackson Foundation, where we shine a light on loss and grief and how it impacts our lives. I am TJ Jackson, and with me, of course, is my eldest brother, Taj Jackson.
What's going on?
Today's date is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. We want to thank everyone for joining us. If you are watching this on the live stream, of course, you are either watching on Facebook or YouTube, but you can also be listening to this over a podcast. And if that is you, thank you for listening to us. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and if you are enjoying it, make sure you like it and leave a review. It helps others who may need to find this help that we do and provide a chance to find it. So we encourage you to do just that. Todd Jackson, I gave the date, and before I start talking about the week, we have a disclaimer to do. So let's go ahead and do that. We are not licensed therapists. We are just ordinary people who've experienced loss in our lives. We've been impacted by it, and we've learned from it. Saying that, if you need professional help, we urge you to seek it and to find it. Do not just rely on us. Taj Jackson, how was your week?
Honestly, TJ, I don't really remember a lot from my week. Counting the days back. Everything's kind of with this whole, thing, Corona and all that stuff. It's just, everything's kind of been mesh for me. Like when you said, just announce the date, I kind of cheated and looked at my, on my computer screen. Cause I was like, what date is it? Cause it's just, it's been that crazy in that way. So I mean, I'm sure you're going to mention some things and I'll be like, oh yeah, in that way. But yeah, it's just been.
Well, before we went live, you mentioned a loss we had today. The legendary Bruce Sweeting, who passed away. And for those who don't know, Bruce, you want to give a little intro to who Bruce was?
Bruce was the engineer for my uncle, for also Quincy Jones, and he's responsible for the sound of a lot of Michael Jackson's greatest masterpieces in that way. He's a legend. He's always been a legend. He was a living legend, and unfortunately now he's passed, but he is someone that I think people respected him and gave him the credit he deserved, but at the same time, you don't really know how much he really inputted, because the sound of music can be influenced a lot by the mixing, as we know as producers himself, and just in terms of the recording of it, they're kind of wizards in the way. So I have a lot of respect for Bruce. We recorded with him at certain times when we did stuff with our uncle. And so he was always great with us. So it's just, it's a sad loss. I'm trying not to be too sad about it, because it's like, it'll ruin my whole week. And I've read some comments that other people have been really sad. So, I'm trying to just celebrate him.
Yeah. Well said, Taj. Well-respected legend, an amazing person, and an amazing engineer. One of the best, if not the best ever, in my opinion. So, R.I.P. to Bruce Sweeting and his family. Something else that I think is important for us to mention is we lost a community member last week. Out of respect to this person's family, I'm not going to give names, but I did want to, pay tribute and pay love to her family. And many of you know who it is, but just out of respect, I don't know if we should be mentioning names. I don't know, Taj, if you disagree with me, but I just wanted to send love on behalf of Taj Jackson, Terrell Jackson, and the whole D.D. Jackson Foundation, as she was a huge 3T fan. Mm-hmm. Anything else, Taj, worth mentioning? And we always try to, as you guys, the viewers, know, we do a show that's on a difficult topic. It's a tough topic to talk about. We talk about loss a lot. We talk about dealing with loss and difficult things. So we always do try to add some type of upbeat flair to it, whether we poke jokes at each other. We try to keep it light, but there are moments when there is loss, and we have to respect that and acknowledge it. So that is the reason for introing and starting the show off this way. But with that said, I think, Taj, are you ready to go on? Unless there's something else in the week, I think we can go on to our wonderful guest we have coming up.
Yeah, let's go to the guest. I can't think of anything, TJ.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't expect anything from you, to be honest.
I don't know why you went back to me, but
all right. Today's episode of the Power of Love show marks part 2 of our mental health series. Yes, we are doing a whole series on mental health. As we said last week, mental health is something I think we all should be paying more attention to and leaning into more. So that's what we're trying to do. And on today's show, we welcome licensed marriage and family therapist Cliff Owens. From 2007 to 2016, Cliff worked as a behavioral coach, teaching children coping skills and healthy habits when they struggled with various behavioral issues. They engaged in discussions to increase their self-awareness and empowerment. The goal was to help these children succeed in school, improve family relationships, and increase their self-esteem. Cliff has also worked in the domestic violence field, having facilitated a battered intervention group whose focus was understanding the cycle of domestic violence, teaching communication skills, and the hallmarks of healthy relationships. Many of the inmates did not otherwise have the opportunity to discuss life and relationships in depth. Oftentimes, dysfunctional habits and ideas were perpetuated through their social context and family history. This was a chance for them to explore other ideas that hopefully would give them better success in all areas of their life. From 2015 to 2017, Cliff provided individual and group psychotherapy for adult sex offenders in the California Sex Offender Management Board certified clinical program. As a therapist working with sex offenders, he became aware of the importance of understanding how people misuse their minds, get lost in their emotions, and make decisions they regret. From 2017 to present, Cliff has worked in a private practice focusing on issues related to trauma, anxiety, depression, and anger management. He works with clients to help them understand how they misuse their mind through what are called thought distortions in cognitive behavioral therapy. Cliff believes that it is important to distinguish between having thoughts and thinking. With all that said, here to discuss all of this and more, please welcome to the Power of Love show, Mr. Cliff Owens.
Thank you.
Hey, Cliff.
Hey there.
First of all, thank you, Cliff, for joining our show and providing some insight to our community. We've done hundreds of shows now, and I've probably battered 50% of the bios, but I think I did okay with yours. Did I miss any Taj's wants to speak?
No, you got all the good stuff.
But is there anything I missaid or misspoke, or was that pretty much straight on for the bio?
Yeah, pretty good. No, it was good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us, Cliff. And as I mentioned, this is part 2 of a series we are doing on mental health. Mm-hmm. And it's always wonderful when we have licensed marriage and family therapists who can join and give their insight to the world. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess this is the question I like to start with is, what made you go into the field you chose? What made you become a licensed marriage and family therapist?
Struggle. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I was one of those people that I could not figure out what I wanted to do with myself. And it was like my late 20s. And I finally started going to some sort of self-help seminars and eventually went to a life coaching program and briefly became a life coach. And that was really a huge shift for me because I learned about the ideas around authenticity and what it meant to be authentic. And for me, emotions and feelings were kind of confusing because they weren't always an accurate reflection of the reality or the situation I was going through. And so it became very mistrustful around emotions. and overly analytical. So that helped a lot in becoming more resourced and really understanding that my mind and my feelings aren't necessarily secure guiding posts, And so when I was a life coach, I was also dealing with clients that I couldn't deal with some of the things that they were doing because I was untrained, such as depression, anxiety, and things like that. And so I had the idea of going to graduate school and combining life coaching and therapy together. I thought that would have been a good combination.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So kind of one led to the other, kind of as you uncovered something, more questions came up, or more of like, oh, I need to get into this. And I like that. That's pretty cool with that journey for knowledge.
Exactly.
So, and Cliff, you've worked with many different demographics, from children to domestic abusers to sexual offenders, and it seems like everything and beyond. Do you believe therapy can truly benefit any type of person despite their background or history?
Yeah, I do. I mean, as long as the client is willing to put the work in, anybody can benefit from therapy. You need a good therapist who's skilled in listening and asking questions. And I think people have this assumption that when you go to a therapist, that's the one you need to stick with. It's not true. If you go to a therapist and you find that things are just not working out, you can either ask for what you need. If you need someone who's more directive, that's fine. If you need someone who just really listens to you and helps you to express your feelings, that's fine. But find a good fit. That's really important. And so, I think a lot of people can benefit from therapy. We're not taught skills to handle life when we're thrown a curveball that's beyond our capacity to handle.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, because that would be my concern in terms of hurting. Like if I went to therapy, it would be hurting that person's feelings of like, we're not, it's not working out in that way. Yeah. And so that's good to know from a therapist's point of view, that it's almost like not that you expect it, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it's you got to find that right fit.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, Todd, I agree with you, man. I think
you'd be worried, right? You'd be like,
I just compassion. I don't know. So I don't know, Cliff. If there's a cheat code or a statement we can use, or something that's easy to say, because I actually feel a lot of people are going through this, and also I should say it this way. I think when you've had a couple of sessions, you've opened up your privacy or open up yourself, and you may feel like more vulnerable, and you may not want to necessarily go through that experience again with another stranger. So maybe either way, I guess I should say, you have to speak up. If you don't feel like you're benefiting or getting anything, you have to speak up, and professional therapists are used to it, I'm sure, and would want you to. So make sure you speak up to make sure you're getting the benefit.
Yeah, if they can handle it, they shouldn't be a therapist.
Okay.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so I see, I had a question, and then I see Patty has the same question. So this is, you've said the difference between thinking and having thoughts.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate more on this?
Sure. Well, our brains are always trying to solve problems. It's a problem-solving machine. And a lot of thoughts we have about things are really kind of random. They sometimes feel insightful, but when you really look at it and analyze it, it's like, no, that really doesn't make much sense, And so there's a difference between like having a thought that is you're skeptical about, you ask questions, like really examining it, and other ones are just like, they feel like insights, right? They feel like a kind of a comprehension, but when you really think about it, it doesn't really work. So we need to think about our thinking. For example, when people have an issue with perfectionism, they're constantly criticizing themselves. If I don't do this the way this needs to be done, my self-worth is diminished. That's a belief, that's a thought. But is it really true, right? So that's around looking at how we think, using identifying thought distortions. And this is a misguided attempt to guide our lives with ways that are ineffective, really ineffective. Nice. And a lot of this stuff comes from our parents. It comes from social conditioning, and we need to really consider the influences that we allow inside us and the agreements we make with life.
Mm.
So it's quite different things.
So Cliff, you've done therapy sessions with those who have been on the abuse side as well as those who have been the abuser. Is that correct? You've done. First, I'm going to ask this question because this is another curious question that Casey asked. How do you get rid of thoughts that it's your fault if you were the one who's abused? Because I've heard about and seen that many who are abused, they take the blame themselves as if they did something wrong. Right. So what do you suggest for people who may be thinking that, how to get through that scenario?
Right. So this is a perfect example of having a thought, right? And as opposed to thinking. So when we get stuck in a loop. I have a feeling about a situation. I feel responsible for my abuse. I have my mind that's now co-opted by my feelings, looking for evidence to why that's true. And so the mind has got a filter on it. Well, I should have done it this way. Well, if I wouldn't have said that, he wouldn't have hit me, right? So you get stuck in this loop. The thing is to really start to question the thinking itself. Wait, whose problem is this really? Is this a fair response to what I've done? Why couldn't we just talk this out as opposed to him hitting me, right? Or she hitting me? So when it comes to being the victim of domestic violence, it's often the case when someone assumes responsibility for that abuse because they misbehaved in some way that was really an unrealistic standard. So they need to really question their thinking around that. And one of the most effective ways to get rid of a thought train is to be with the emotion that's behind it, because the emotion often creates the questions, answer those questions, and make those kinds of plans. So if a person feels guilt, you really need to distinguish between false guilt and true guilt. And most people have, especially when they're in an abusive relationship, a false sense of responsibility for the abuse happening. They're taking responsibility for the other person's behavior and their responses. So opening your heart to that feeling itself in what we call observer ego, and that is the ability to recognize what you feel, track it without getting lost in it. Okay. You're like, oh, here's me having my false guilt moment. These are my thoughts. I should have been responsible for this. And just breathe and let it pass. Everything is temporary, including those feelings. And instead of being pushed around by our internal world, we just observe it. And when we observe it, it passes, you get centered in yourself, and then you can ask, what's needed in this situation?
Nice.
Great advice. Thank you, Cliff. Now, on the flip side, you work with clients to help them from, as you said, misusing their minds. Yeah. How do we, as humans, misuse our minds, and what strategies can we use to combat these type of habits?
Right. It's very important to really familiarize yourself with the ways that we misuse our minds. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, we call them thought distortions or thinking errors. So it could be something like catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, having some sort of mental filter, like minimizing the positive or exaggerating the negative. Okay, things like that. And so when you realize what one you tend to use, so I send a list out to all my clients and say, I want you to read this. These are a list of common thought distortions. Identify the ones you use and don't judge yourself. We all use them. And you really be careful around, oh, here's me catastrophizing. My day went bad between 3 and 4, but the whole day's a wreck. And my future's a wreck. The whole weekend's a wreck, right? That's catastrophizing. And so you want to notice, oh, there's me doing that again. It's just a mental habit. It's nothing more than that. It's not who you are, and it's not your future.
Is there any, I cautiously ask simple, but are there any simple ways we can combat that from falling victim or falling into that pattern of catastrophic or making things worse?
Yeah. Mostly it's, again, just a noticing. You got to think about your thinking. So this is really more about self-awareness. How am I using my mind when I'm triggered, right? And what feelings do I have when I'm triggered? And again, I'm taking on the observer ego function that we all have. And just, okay, I'm having a moment. And you pause, and you slow down. Okay? Just for an example, think of the kinds of, say you have a partner, and they typically come home around 6, and they're late. If you're a jealous person, what kind of thoughts do you think you're going to have? Well, how are you going to answer those questions? What are you going to do when that person comes home? Right? That's a very different scenario to trusting your partner and thinking different kinds of questions and having different kinds of plans when they come home. You see how the difference is?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
That would be engaging in emotional thinking. I'm jealous. My jealousy is an accurate reflection of my situation. Here are the questions and answers and plans that I'm going to do, because this has got to be the truth, because I feel this way. We don't question what we feel. We don't question what we think. It's simply an accurate reflection of our situation. You got to be able to separate a little bit. Observe yourself having the reactive state. Breathe. Don't interfere with it. Let it pass. It has a natural lifespan, and then it goes away on its own. What you don't want to do is reuse your mind to regenerate that pain again. And that's where the thought distortions come in. We feel entitled to our reactivity. Okay, and that keeps us stuck.
It's great. It's great. One of your focuses is mindfully observing the inner world, reacting to the outer world.
Yeah.
What have these observations taught you about how people approach the world? And how can we work to be more mindful, have a wider perspective outside of ourselves, and be less reactionary?
That is such a simple question. No.
I know, right?
No, see, the thing around, like, one of the common thought distortions that we have is either or thinking. You know, it's either my way or the highway. You know, you're either right or you're wrong. And so, again, the observer ego allows us to experience our limitations without buying into them all the time. That's really what's going on. When someone doesn't agree with me and I feel offended, and then I waste my time trying to convince them and change their mind, right? A better approach would be to help me to understand what that person thinks. What's the underlying value behind their argument? And is there any common ground in that? Okay. Finding common ground and finding what the value is in their position can really be a way to understand somebody instead of trying to change their mind. That's why there's so many. We're leading into a very fundamentalist mindset, you know, fanaticism, because we don't want to understand what people are believing, what they believe. Okay. So having that capacity to just like really relate instead of react. Right, that's really important.
Thank you, Cliff, for that. Nicole has a great question or a great comment, which I think is something that a lot of us feel, you know. And so, in that sense, for a layman, I could say this is normal, but I'm curious to know how you would respond to this, Cliff. Nicole says, somebody asked what made me happy in 2020, and I wasn't able to give one answer. Is it normal?
It's normal for 99% of the population. You know, and my focus with my clients, I want them to remove conditions to their happiness. And we have tons of conditions. The world needs to be the way I want it. People need to be the way I want them to be. All these conditions to happiness. My job is, when we resource ourselves through the mindfulness exercises, we heal ourselves. When my presence of mind meets my pain, I'm healing myself. And that creates a lot of autonomy over time, where I need less and less from the external world. I don't need the world to be perfect for me to be happy. I choose to be happy because it's my choice. The world can be going to hell in a handbasket, and I'm going to be happy because it's not dependent on anybody else but me. That's where I want to get my clients to recognize life is not going to always get you what you want. You can still be happy on your way there. And so when we are present to the limitations, to our pain, what we're actually doing at the same time is opening up to our inner resources to be happy, unconditionally happy, and eventually unconditionally loving. All right. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. There was a question, first of all, and I want to address something to Nicole. Nicole, you know, I think, as you said, Cliff, 99%. there's a lot of us out there who feel that way. So, hang in there and understand you're not normal. And I want to ask you, Cliff, what is it about difficult moments or new and unsettling times that makes us feel so alone, so isolated? Why do we feel like it's just us going through it?
Right. A lot of the things that we are normally, our lifestyle has been interrupted a lot, And to Nicole's question, I would say on a very basic level, we work from the inside and the outside, So address the barriers and the conditions to your happiness on the inside. And at the same time, identify what your true needs are and do your best to get those needs met. It's through social interaction, creative activity, learning something new, right?
Yeah.
And creating structure in your day it's really difficult. People are finding it very, very difficult when they have a completely open schedule. They don't know what to do with themselves, and it's really hard to create the structure and the discipline to get things done. So I would identify what your real needs are and start going after those goals. This is also an indicator of how little discipline we have in our society. And we've used a lot of contrived structure around the work schedule and whatever extracurricular activities to create the structure we need to be fulfilled. Complete opposite. We're at a 180. And so using this time in a very meaningful way is a very important thing to do. Do what's meaningful to you. Okay.
Love that. And I think that's what's helped me is doing new things and trying learning new skills and just trying to find some positive lining out of this whole, time.
Yeah. So, I think it's really also reflecting on how important relationships are to us, and so really connecting with people in a meaningful way can be a way to reinforce the value of the friendships and to find some joy in life.
Another question from Casey, which I love, is when you went through a down relationship or a bad marriage or a divorce or separation, sometimes it's hard to open your heart up and not have that fear of falling in love again. Yeah. So the first question is that a normal feeling? And then the second question is there anything you would advise for someone who may be going through that?
Yeah, it is a very normal feeling. And what I advise is for people to open up to their pain. And that is the salve that helps us to heal and get back to being centered and feeling complete again. And also when we're opening up to our pain, it changes the relationship we have with the world and other people. Our relationships needs change as well. We're more independent. And when we're taking that risk with love, it's not as threatening when you're self-resourced, okay? It's not, the emotional hunger is not there. So it is normal to feel that fear again, but what I'm recommending is opening up, being with the pain, tracking that, being aware of body sensations so it occupies your mind. What does heartbreak really feel like for you, right? Is there a pain in your chest? Do you feel like you have a crack in your chest? Is it pulsating? Is it hard? Is it smooth? Is it motility? And really open up and be present to yourself. That will help you move through that emotional stage and be in a place where you're not projecting your old emotional baggage from your past relationship onto your new partner. It allows you to see that person for who they really are more clearly than if you hadn't done that work.
Love that. Okay, so this is another question I have. I'm a reader, Cliff, so I'm curious to know, is there a book or other resources you would recommend that might help someone struggling during these difficult times?
Sure. Yeah. I go through these phases where I just buy a bunch of books and I start reading a lot. And so I have recently made several purchases. So yeah, I do. I have a lot of books. And again, the ones that I focus on is just because my orientation is for people to be self-resourced. Okay. So the books I recommend are in that tradition, in the psycho-spiritual stuff. All right. So books by Sherry Huber, Cheri Huber. She's very good. She's a Zen teacher, in Marin, California. And she's written several books. And the one that I recently purchased, How to Get from Where You Are to Where You Want to Be. And she also has other fine books. They're handwritten, and they're very easy to read. Another one is Mastery of Love by Don Ruiz. And then his son wrote a book, Self-Mastery, Don Ruiz Jr. And then one I've really taken up, because if I'm not going to use my feelings and my thoughts necessarily dictate what my choices are going to be in life, how do I decide what to do? And it's really about values and commitments and passions that you have. And so getting all the reactive stuff out of the way is a removing of the barriers, so you can be more self-expressed in the world and bring more of your spirit out into your own expression. And so when we make value-based choices, that's what we're doing. We're creating alignment with ourselves. So there's a wonderful book called Learning to Thrive by Dr. Suro, S-U-R-O. And then one of my favorite authors is Albert Ellis. He's an older gentleman. He's passed away. He's very funny. And so he has a book called How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything. So
that is
love it. Love it. That sounds like a solid library that someone will start. So
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Taj, were you about to say something? I don't want to cut you off, Taj.
I'm used to it. I'm just kidding. Comments and stuff like that. No, I used to be more of a reader. TJ is definitely a reader in that way. So it's kind of just you reading off those books, titles and stuff like that makes me kind of not regret, but just get back into it. So it's just like,
And Don, I haven't read the Ruiz one, The Mastery of Love, but I've read the Four Agreements. That's the same author, right?
Yes, it is actually.
Yeah. So, and I love his writing style. So I love. I've read Four Agreements many times. So I haven't checked out Mastery of Love, but I will.
Yeah. Five Attachments by Don Ruiz Jr. is what I'm reading now. And he talks about how we identify with our beliefs and they become limitations.
Now, before we started, we were talking about a book. You were talking about the importance of diversity.
Yeah.
You were doing something. You were saying some really great nuggets of knowledge that I'd love for you to share. What you were sharing with me right before we went live. Yeah.
It's in this book, The Five Attachments by Don Ruiz Jr. And in our times right now, there's so much divisiveness and lack of tolerance for each other. And we have this identification with our knowledge. We have identification with our beliefs. And one of the things that tends to be invoked at that time is this feeling like I'm right and you're wrong. And it exacerbates the conflict, and creates more division and stuff like that. And I would really encourage people to refrain from doing those kinds of things and be more on the idea of trying to understand somebody and trying to prove somebody wrong, change their mind. Is a way of almost judging them and saying, you can't be how you are. You can't have your values. You can't be your unique self. And that is a way of dehumanizing somebody. So what I recommend is really like trying to understand what your people in your life are like. 10,000 years human beings have been living in community together, and we still treat each other like crap. How is it that it's taking that damn long for us to develop the skill sets to appreciate the diversity that always existed on this planet and will always continue on this planet? We need to really stop being threatened by diversity, okay, and try to really understand each other.
I love that. I think that's so powerful, and I appreciate you sharing that, Cliff. It's great to hear it from you, and the way you say it, I love. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, well, we are close to the time, and as I mentioned to you before we went on, I'd love to give you anywhere up to a minute to talk about anything you want. It could be your favorite movie. It could be, you told us about your books. Yeah. It could be your favorite meal, your favorite hobby. It could be that something else that is on your mind currently. Yeah. Anything you want to talk about, Cliff, feel free to go ahead and go now.
Okay. I think I may owe Nicola an apology. I didn't want to minimize her struggle to find happiness. So the 99% thing was, I should apologize for that. But it is important for her to identify her needs and then also like really work on the inside so she can have less conditions to her happiness. One of the things that I've been doing a lot of reading on is I use my profession to help me to evolve as a human being, you know, and how I have attachments to my information, like the knowledge I have. And one of the things that I worked on for a while was giving up judgment. When judgment's one of the main things that causes us to be upset. And we judge the world, we judge people, we judge ourselves. And looking at how I feel like I still need to earn my own love, right? I need to do things right. I need to do this. I need to be this way. And it's just kind of an odd thing that we do this as human beings, where we only love ourselves unconditionally. And to really highlight the value around reflection and where we impose limitations on ourselves, you know? And so for me, I was focusing a lot on giving up judgment. And then the next one was giving up complaining, which is really hard, you know? But it's around really communicating instead of just complaining and sulking, right? And then the next level is, for me, is giving up preferences. You know, how I have attachment to preferences, and the world has a very different plan sometimes. And that creates even more liberation, less conditions for my happiness. And happiness is my choice. I invoke it because I can, you know. And there's a lot of things that we can do as human beings to invoke a sense of happiness. We can invoke our sense of belonging. You know, people feel very lonely, right? And they see that as a problem where their external world is not matching up to their expectations, right? Well, if you deal with it like any other feeling, like anger and jealousy, you know, and just be with it and open up, you realize that you can be alone, and it's not a displeasure. So yeah.
It's great. Wonderful. I love how you say less conditions to your happiness. I love that. You know, I think that's right on. Oftentimes we put so many conditions, and so many things have to go right for us to be happy, you know, and the better we can get at not letting those conditions determine our happiness, and to own our ability to control our happiness, I think is the more happiness we will have. So I love how you said that. All right, Cliff. So let me ask you this. What's the best way people can learn more about you, or is there a way for our community to reach out if they need to?
I have a website, odysseyforpersonalwellness.com, and you can reach me through the website.
Great.
Yeah.
Boom. Yeah. Okay, that spells right. All right, sweet. So odysseyforpersonalwellness.com. Cliff, we are going to wrap up the show, but again, I want to thank you for joining us and being our guest for our part 2 of our mental health series. You've been a great help. Our community has enjoyed your knowledge. So on behalf of Mr. Taj Jackson and myself and the rest of the DDJF Foundation, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Taj Jackson, is there anything else you want to say before we close the show?
No, I mean, I'm just a student. I love learning about this in a way. Some of the things I do naturally, which is good. I'm always a happy person usually in that way. And so a lot of the things were reaffirming the way what you were talking about in that. Yeah. There's other things that I need to work on. So
a very important thing is being able to not be a victim of our history.
Yes.
It's huge. If we cannot be a victim of our history, we have really liberated ourselves.
That's a great point. And I look at my life, and I have to be careful how I say this because everyone's different in that way, but I've always chose to not be that victim in that way. I've had a hard life, and I don't know what made me do that, but I know it's not easy for everyone to do that.
So. Yeah. And we're not all the same in that way.
Yeah.
And I can confirm that Taj has always been, out of the 3 of us, my 3 brothers, the 3 of us, 2 brothers and myself, he's always been the one that can not let his past determine how he feels presently or going forward. Yeah. So there's not many things I commend and look up to Taj on, but that is definitely one of them.
What it was is that in high school, I beat myself up. Like I actually was the extreme of that. Everything was like catastrophe, you know. And so as an adult, I was like, I can't live like this. And I kind of made a 180 and it's just I refuse to go back to that person in that way.
I think as an adult, it's important for us to be responsible to the pain we didn't ask for. And that's what really gives us the freedom to eventually earn that freedom back.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. Cliff, thank you once again, my friend. And I truly appreciate it. And again, on behalf of the community, the DDJF Foundation, thanks for being our guest.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
To everyone else, we will see you guys next Wednesday, same time at 1 o'clock. Until then, please stay safe. Remember, there's a community that's there for you. And as Cliff said, I love it. Don't let conditions determine your happiness. It takes a while to get there, I believe. But if you can consciously try to remember that, to simplify things that can lead you to happiness, go ahead and make that first step. On behalf of Taj Jackson, thank you guys so much. And we will see you next week.